this morning when the police commissioner and I spoke on our morning briefing with the other team. We were clear that tomorrow is a day that's going to draw a great deal of attention to our city. And we know there are many questions around the movement of the city, and we want to make sure that we send a very clear and loud message. As the deputy mayor stated, New York City is always ready. We know that this is a city where our NYPD and other law enforcement entities must be prepared at any given moment for anything to happen in this city. To start, I want to make it clear, the commissioner has stated over and over again, there has been no specific credible threats to our city at this time. And all New Yorkers should go on with their regular activities. That means going to work, going to school. We're going to do our job as we always do. If you usually drive, we're stating take public transportation. It is easy to get around on public transportation because we expect some disruptions and additional traffic. There's a great deal of additional traffic that may come in the city, and there will be street closures near the courts and throughout the city. While there may be some rabble-rousers thinking about coming to our city tomorrow, our message is clear and simple. Control yourselves. New York City is our home, not a playground for your misplaced anger. We are the safest large city in America because we respect the rule of law in New York City. And although we have no specific threats, people like Marjorie Greene, who is known to spread misinformation and hate speech, she stated she's coming to town. While you're in town, be on your best behavior. As always, we will not allow violence or vandalism of any kind. And if one is caught participating in any act of violence, they will be arrested and held accountable, no matter who you are. And I want to, again, thank the police department, the commissioner, for their response and for the necessary preparation as we deal with this major historical potential event that would take place in the city. This time, I'd like to introduce the police commissioner of the city of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. As always, the NYPD is prepared to ensure that everyone is able to have their voices heard peacefully while exercising their First Amendment rights. We do this work in close collaboration with our federal, state, and local partners, because keeping our city safe is absolutely a collective effort. As the mayor stated, there are no credible or specific threats to New York City at this time. New Yorkers may see an increased police presence in parts of the city and should anticipate intermittent road closures over the next 2 days, particularly in Manhattan. To avoid delays, I too urge everyone to use mass transit when possible. As I said, our job is to facilitate and safeguard the rights of people to express themselves and those going about their daily activities. But I will remind everyone that violence and destruction are not part of legitimate, lawful expression, and it will never be tolerated in our city. The people we serve know this, just as they know that the NYPD will be out there today, tomorrow, and every day to make sure that they are safe. Thank you. Mr. Mayor? Sure. Well, we'll take some questions.
Commissioner, has Marjorie Greene or anyone else for that matter put forward permit, and has anyone been granted?
So the permitting is actually done through City Hall, but I will say that anyone who protests is expected to express themselves peacefully and orderly.
Arrest or has there been an arrest in a powder incident involving the Rachel?
That incident is still under investigation at this time.
Commissioner or Mr. Mayor, have you noticed any movement at Port Authority or at the airport? Any influx of people that are coming in that you've noticed that are coming here for this event? Any estimate on that, or have you not seen?
We value our relationship with our partners, and we're in constant communication with them. So if they do see an influx of people or something out of the ordinary, they will contact us. At this time, we don't see that happening, but we will have real-time information if that does occur.
Does anyone have specifics, I don't know if this is a question for you, Commissioner, or the Mayor, about where it's, I know you said intermittent road closures, but can we expect a certain how many blocks around the courthouse will be closed? Was the FDR drive or any of the highway movement? And will that information be shared with the
So there are going to be rolling road closures. As I'm sure you can understand based on the sensitivity of it. It's going to be moving, but we will make sure we have enough officers to facilitate transport throughout the city. There is one area close to Trump Tower that will have a road that is closed just to facilitate its transport. But beyond that, there'll be rolling road closures intermittently through the city. We're trying to have minimal amount of intrusion into city life.
I wanted to ask, what additional measures is the NYPD taking, not only to protect DA Bragg, but also other members of his office?
We take any threats or concerns of our elected officials and anyone in the city very seriously. So we have provided some assistance in that regard, and we are investigating any threats that may be made to the DA or any of his staff.
Will the Times Square gun-free zone be moved in and around courthouses?
As you know, a number of laws were passed when we went into having sensitive zones and restricted zones. It's actually an e-felony to carry in some of those zones, even if you have a license. Some of those zones include courthouses, federal buildings, and First Amendment activities. So we're not going to move those. I think responsible gun ownership requires that you know what the laws are, where you are protesting, and we expect everyone to adhere to ours.
Well, going back to police presence, how many officers do you expect to be on the streets? And also, the Secret Service, I mean, how have they come in and basically told you what to do? Or, I mean, how much control are they having over security?
We work with the Secret Service all the time. These are our partners. I won't go into how many numbers of police officers will be on the street, but we will have enough to facilitate mobile units if we need to respond to anything. But this is a collaborative effort with our partners in the Secret Service.
Commissioner, NYPD personnel days off suspended or canceled for the interim.
So you're listening there to Keyshawn Sewell, the New York City Police Department Commissioner, along with the New York Mayor Eric Adams, giving a security briefing about the arrangements ahead of tomorrow's historic day here in the United States and in New York, where Donald Trump will be arraigned, and after his indictment on criminal charges. We heard some headlines out of this. They said there's sending a clear and loud message. They're not going to tolerate any sort of violence, and there's no specific or credible threat that there will be any sort of violence tomorrow. And they also a warning of sorts to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's the conservative congresswoman who urging her to be on her best behavior while leading a protest tomorrow in New York City. Let's go right to CNN's chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst, John Miller, as well as the CNN senior law enforcement analyst, Chief Ramsey. John, the headline, no specific credible threat to the city. What's your reaction?
That's what we were expecting to hear, in that they've been looking at everything from social media posts to bomb threats that have been called in the week before last, and the entire threat picture. And none of it rises to anything where they can say, this is something where we think there's something behind it where it's actually going to occur. That's the good news. The important part from an intelligence standpoint is you have to understand that you're not going to know of every credible threat or what lurks in the shadows. So the bifurcated posture there is they're watching the threat traffic, but they're also prepared for the unknown. And I think that's what the police commissioner was talking about, which is they're not only following the threats, but they're investigating even threats that are posted in social media to say, who's on the other end of that threat? Do they need to be interviewed? Were they serious about the threat? Do they have the capability to carry it out? And so far, they haven't seen anything that crosses the line. But again, they're prepared.
And they are prepared. And Chief, to you, the mayor mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, called on her and others to, quote, be on your best behavior. What do you take away from that stark warning?
Well, what I take away is it doesn't matter who you are. If you break the law, if you engage in any act of violence, you will suffer the consequences, period. And we learned from January 6th, obviously, that these things can turn bad. But having said that, it sounds like the NYPD is prepared. I have no doubt that they are in a position to be able to deal with whatever may come up, both in terms of just the regular control of what takes place on the various sites, but also having mobile units that can move from point A to point B very rapidly. You know, the mayor and the commissioner both mentioned something that I think people lose sight of oftentimes because we get so focused on the security itself. But for the average New Yorker, they're not interested in what's going on. They just want to get from point A to point B. They want to get to the bank. They want to get to the grocery store. So you have to balance things and keep people informed when you have street closures and things of that nature, so that they can move freely or as freely as they can around the city. And that's a balancing act in and of itself. You try to get people to take public transportation, but that's not always, what people choose to do. So it's a balancing act. So they've got a lot of moving parts. They're dealing with what's going on in terms of the ex-president, him surrendering to various sites that need to be dealt with. But there's also day-to-day business that goes on in the city. All your resources cannot be in one place. They're going to be handling everything that takes place in New York on that day.